financial decision-making, financial habits, perspectives, they all come from who you are, and it's pretty deeply wired. And if you are a spender by nature, can you change that? Yes, with a lot of discipline.
Are you content in your business? I'm Si McMahon, and I'm on a mission to help business leaders and brand owners succeed through sharing stories, advice, and inspiration. This is the Content in Business podcast. Hey everyone, quick message. Something that comes up time and time again in my interviews with people is how important but how difficult marketing is. So we've created a scorecard that evaluates your digital marketing, gives you a unique score, and provides advice on how you can improve. You can get it today. It's completely free, and it's at playfairmarketing.com/marketing score. We'll link to it in the episode notes as well. Now, on with the show. In this episode, I speak to Hugh Massie, founder of DNA Behavior, and wow, we go deep in this one. We speak about self-awareness when it comes to leadership and finance. We talk about setting long-term goals, but understanding that the journey isn't always what you expect it'll be. We talk about how to behave as a leader, especially when times get tough. It's a great, great conversation and really insightful. It's a long episode, but it's a real great listen. So here's my interview with Hugh Massie. Hugh, welcome to the show.
Great, Simon. It's great to be with you.
Thank you for joining us. Tell us your story so far.
So you can probably tell from my accent, I'm originally from Sydney, Australia, and nowadays I live in Atlanta, Georgia with my family. I've been here for around 20 years. My sort of life and journey is probably different to a lot of people, which makes it interesting. I started my business career as a chartered accountant. That's what you would call it in England, and what we called it in Australia. And I did that for about 10 years, working in Sydney, then Singapore and Thailand. So I had some international experience for a few years. Went back to Sydney and, with Arthur Andersen, which was the accounting firm. And then I decided that after about 2 years back in Sydney, that I would go and set up a wealth management business and go on a more of an entrepreneurial path as far as my career was concerned. I think I was a bit like a caged up tiger sitting there at Arthur Andersen. I was good at what I was doing in providing tax advice and things, but somewhere I knew I needed to stretch my legs somewhere else. So I went on the street, became an entrepreneur, and set up the wealth management business. And it was, pretty successful early on. But I started to have these aha experiences, if you want to call it that, around, what was I doing in that business? What was I delivering? And a friend of mine asked me one day, Hugh, you don't seem totally happy with what you're doing. You don't seem excited. What are you really passionate about? And I said, look, I want to help people all over the world become financially self-empowered. And I'd never addressed my passion in that way or with such clarity, Simon. And it got me to take stock of who I was, what I was doing. In a way, I was sort of a little bit on a journey anyway, searching, and this came out. And so I took the next 6 months and started thinking, okay, what does that mean? How would I operationalize that? I went through all the options. And what it came down to really was it came down to human behavior. And that, what I started to see was that every person has an inherent behavioral style, comes with that inherent financial behavior. And that if I was really going to help people become financially self-empowered, I needed to help them with personal self-awareness, not only around their talents, but also their financial behaviors. And I think the other part to it was I came to see that when I reflected on client experiences, when people were under pressure, they behave differently than they did in a normal socialized setting. Or, if someone comes, like you and I were conversing at the start of this conversation, that would tell you something about me, but not totally a lot. But if you saw me under pressure in a stress situation, you would learn a whole lot more. And that's really what you would want to know if you're going to advise people about their money, about their life. And I think that was part of it as well, is that I realized that when you were advising clients about their money, you're really advising them about their life. And I always wanted to, when I was an accountant, put a tailor-made suit on every person. That was the goal. And in a way, intuitively, I was doing this before I even got to the wealth management business. I was customizing how I dealt with every client. When I was the accounting firm, I was pretty young. And so once I got those experiences or those thoughts in order in my head, I started to do some research on how would I bring it to life. And I then had a chance meeting with a psychologist. And she told me, this is, Hugh, this is what you're saying, is that people have a natural hardwired behavior. And it's true. And it's set from the time they're around 3 years old. And we now know today that from other research, about 85% of how you are wired to make decisions, the core of who you are, is set by the time you're 3 years old. And it's 95% by the time you're 7. And that's what, we can all adapt it temporarily and in moments, we can show up differently in social settings, but under pressure, that's what you go back to. You go back to sort of, in a way, your animal instincts. There was a famous, he just recently passed away, Professor Daniel Kahneman, who talked about this in terms of level 1 behavior and level 2 behavior. But it's interesting, we were already onto this at DNA Behavior before Kahneman came out with his book about that. But it only confirmed what we'd been thinking, what we'd been doing, since 2001. So once Carol, who was working with me, sort of confirmed my thinking, I then said, well, I want a measurement system for this. If I'm going to make this scalable and get to a lot of people, I need a system. And from what I could see, a lot of the other personality profiles out there certainly didn't address money, but they also didn't address really what hardwired behavior was. Now, there'd be some today that start to talk about that, but that's in a workplace setting. And so we set about building system, and that's what brought me to America. I came 40 times in 4 years, sort of between 2002 and 2006, to validate what is today the DNA systems, which is, to be concrete, it's a psychometric measurement system that gets to the core of who you are. We can measure up to 4,000 insights about any person, addressing work talents, how you deal with money. So, a lot of the time, the financial planners who work with us want to help their clients understand this is your propensity to spend money, spending and saving. So I've been a big proponent that understanding someone's habits around saving and spending is more important to know than risk-taking, for example. Although we measure risk-taking, but we measure lots of insights, how people want to be communicated with. But it's all Simon in the system, and people have typically completed a questionnaire to do it. That was the key thing to get. It's sort of the right data in, right data out principle. But it's a very unique structure. We don't ask questions like, if the stock market went down 20% overnight, what would you do tomorrow? Or if your mother died and you inherited $1 million, what would you do? We don't ask those kind of questions. It's asking people to choose between 3 words, like aspiring, patient, and detailed. But believe it or not, that produces a scientific result. And that's really what I did. And then it's how it's all operationalized to become meaningful. So that, I know I've given you a lot there, but that's been my journey. And really I've set about then building DNA Behavior as a global platform over the last 20 years. We've had people completed in lots of different languages in 125 countries, but we would have more of an English-speaking focus. But this can be done anywhere, and there'll be people somewhere in the world doing it right now. So that's the journey. And what I suppose if you put it down to it, this is why I sometimes say to people I'm a reformed accountant, because I've realized that if you're going to get better results in life, you've got to be able to build better relationships. You've got to understand people. You've got to have a more people-centric approach. And ultimately, it's people that make decisions and make choices, usually for themselves. And that's the self-empowerment piece. If we can help people be better at decision-making, be better at discernment, understand the impact of what they're doing, we can help them have a better life. And deep down below all of that, there's a word that is very important in all of this is stress. And that if people are less stressed, they will consequently be happier, more successful, and healthier for longer, because stress is really what kills people. And money is one of the greatest sources of stress.
Absolutely.
And I take the position that if I can help people be more aligned to who they are in the work they do, in the life they're living, the relationships they have, they will be more successful, and they'll come with greater happiness, and they probably will be better at dealing with money, and they'll live longer. And so that's really the story, in simple terms. And I think today technology, though, is a differentiator. I've always had this thinking for me has not changed over the last 20, 24 years that I've been doing it. But technology allows us to do this a whole lot better now. That's probably the game changer.
Yeah. I think there's so much to pick apart there. I think the first...
There is a lot, so I'll let you get in there.
I think it's a fantastic insight into obviously what took you through and brought you to what you do today. And then the first thing for me is time and again, the purpose there, being able to identify a passion, turn that into a purpose, I think is for anybody is immediately getting you on the path to success. So I love hearing that at the start of a story like that. But when it gets down to obviously, the things that you do, absolutely. Everybody wants to be a kind of person, but if you want to be a better person, or if you want to be a certain kind of person, you have to first understand who you are today. Absolutely, you can kind of conduct yourself in certain ways in certain situations, but you're 100% right when you say it's the extremes that bring out the extreme behaviors or the core behaviors. I always have a saying that, the true test of a leader is not when things are going well. It's when things are going difficult. I've seen loads of great leaders do really well in successful businesses with great situations. I've seen a lot less leaders be good when the things are tough. To keep that level of good leadership through tough times.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting point around leadership, and I think it's good that you bring it up and it cements it that, in good times, it's easy to be a relational leader, which in a way you need to be. We need to be compassionate, friendly, approachable as leaders. But and that's easy when times are going well and money's flowing in the bank account. But the real test, as you say, is when the pressure is on and things are difficult, whether it's in the economy or you've hit a wall somewhere in the business, or product launch isn't working, whatever it is, you're getting heat from somewhere. Then how do you handle yourself and personally, and then how do you handle yourself with the team? That's the thing. And then what decisions do you make? And do you then operate in fear? The heavy hand comes out, you become the dictator. start yelling and screaming, all those things. And if you lose your cool, if you want to call it that, at that time, you will lose it all.
Mm.
And that trust is very hard to win back.
Mm.
And I think that's then where, if you are I am a results orientated person, if you want to take it back to the psychometrics, how I operate. And I've had to learn about relationships, and it's still continuous learning. I mean, it's the same in your family. If you lose your cool at home too, you're going to have problems there as well. I think it doesn't really matter what the setting is. It's problematic. But for me to realize that I then have to concentrate on the relationships and almost be ultra aware, and that's when I've got to adapt myself, because there is no excuse for me just to sit there and say, well, I'm a results orientated person, and to go around yelling and screaming and hit the hammer in the wrong way. There's nothing wrong with being tough or disciplined, and sometimes a difficult decision needs to be made. But you can do that with compassion. You can still be approachable in how that's handled and have conversations and whatnot. And I think that's what we're talking about here, and that's where the self-awareness is absolutely vital, to know what would happen when you're under pressure.
Yeah.
And who you will be and might become, because then you've got to train yourself to manage all of that. And this stuff happens in split seconds. I think that's what people don't realize, and you can't just go and look it up in a coaching book, right? It's a lot of work on yourself first, and you've got to get that right.
And I can imagine when it comes to wealth management, money management, spending habits, again, people say about frivolous spending or impulse purchases and all those kind of things. And I can imagine that there is a close tie to, your nature or kind of deeply rooted needs or flaws or whatever that make you act out those spending habits.
I think it's a much closer tie than what people realize, in that your financial decision-making, your financial habits, perspectives, they all come from who you are, and it's pretty deeply wired. And if you are a spender by nature, can you change that? Yes, with a lot of discipline and structure put in. It's not fun, and it's very tough to do. But what you'll find is, though, that the spenders will still find ways to go around the plan and still spend off the side, if you want to call it that. And we just talked about leadership. It's the same with leadership. If you are inherently, as a leader, a spender, operate with more bravado, pomp and ceremony, want things to look nice and good, and whatever, that all filters through in the business. And you'll overspend on innovation, you'll overspend on the office, entertainment, whatever, because you think that that's what everybody else wants and needs and what works. But maybe it doesn't. And I think that's, again, coming back to, Simon, that understanding yourself for every dimension of your life is important, and then being aligned through every dimension of your life. And spending is the big one. I think that it's probably the hardest habit to change.
And as you say, it is one of the most stressful things of life.
It is. And if you are a spender and people talk to you about spending, if you're a spender and someone says, well, you've got to save, that's like Antichrist. That's just a word that is, you're not going to respond. Whereas what I do, and I think this is the behavioral element here, is we talk about a spending plan. Now, a spending plan is the same as a savings plan. It's just different words, and it might be presented slightly differently, but with the same result. And I think if you're a spender and you hear it's, well, this is my spending plan, but it happens to be a little bit left over at the end that gets invested or saved, you've achieved the same goal as saying, here's a savings plan. But what you haven't done is gone against the person's emotions, how they're wired, how they hear and process things. And our learning styles are so important to understand. It's like on the other side, you can talk about goals to Hugh Massie because I'm a goal-driven person. But to my opposite, the word goal is an absolute turnoff. You've got to sort of change the language to more desires. And what are they feeling? But we're still trying to get to the same place.
It's a positive reinforcement, isn't it? Just like any way to train an animal, we're no different. We're animals as well, and we will respond better to positive reinforcement than to reprimanding or restrictions or anything that's going to try and subside who we really are at our core.
Yeah, I think the difficulty with all of this is then the holy grail becomes, if you're the leader or you're the financial planner who's a leader of their clients, then how do you handle this or how do you handle this for each person and treat them on their terms in a customized way for each person? And that's where you can then revert back to your own style, and you just start doing it your way. And what happens is, because you're not adapting, you're probably hitting the mark with 40% of people out there and missing the mark with the other 60.
From obviously, you've got a great system there, and I love the whole motivation behind it. I love the mission and what you're intending to do, and I think that's definitely obviously the keys to a great business. What else do you think is it that's brought the success that you've achieved?
Yeah, I think that I was wondering when that question would come up, and I think if we go back to the start, is probably what I would say for other people thinking about starting a business, or they're already in a business, and where do I go next? In my mind, the motto I follow is to dream big at the start. So you've got to have a big dream, and hopefully that with that dream is a big impact. And then is to start small and finish big. I think that a lot of I've been around a lot of entrepreneurs through being an entrepreneurs organization, Titan 100. YPO, all these types of groups, and I think that people start measuring themselves against others too quickly and too early, and that becomes a complete mental frustration, and you make decisions around that. Well, gee, I've been in my business 5 years, so my revenue must be X, and this person was in the business for 3 years and they're already a billionaire, and this type of thing, and or I've got to live here, or I've got to have this car and be living in this neighborhood and traveling first class and all this stuff. That is, not in their league for where they're at. They're making suboptimal decisions to do, with that. And a lot of the time, you don't know what the circumstances are of other people and how they've got to that place. Could be very different. You don't know what mental pressures they have, stresses, and I've seen people that have outwardly been very successful and then their lives fall apart. They mentally fall apart. So it comes back to the self-awareness. You got to play your own game. But I think it's really defining but I would say come back to the point of defining a big vision, a big dream. What's the human impact you're going to have? So, in terms of how you're going to measure your success on the journey, should be done around, in my view, around what your human impact is. Like for me, so how many people have participated in our system? I know every person that participates in our system in some way, I am impacting them with my thinking. I'm helping them become self-empowered. The financial piece takes care of itself out of that if I've designed the right business model behind it. But if all I go around doing is saying, well, my success is measured on the revenue and how much money I've got in the bank, that's actually quite limiting. You're actually limiting yourself. And some of that could go away tomorrow. I know plenty of people that have done pretty well in their business, but then they go and get divorced or something like that happens, or they make a decision in the business or the environment changes and it goes away. Well, has your value as a human being suddenly gone down by half or 75%? Maybe it has if you've measured yourself based on money. And that's the stress point for a lot of entrepreneurs. And so, I really think it's about getting that dream right, the impact. Start small, and then test it, and build it up. But always have an idea of where you're going. And our business has been accelerating a lot in recent times, in some ways because technology's allowed us to. But I had the dream, and I've always working to it, and I knew technology would allow us to do things at some point that we weren't able to do. But you've got to go with what you got and where you're at and what the capabilities are. And if you're really deeply passionate about it, things will unfold. But you've also got to be prepared. I think you've got to be prepared to be flexible. The business plan you start with, business plan A, probably not going to get traction before you're at business plan G, right? And you've got to be prepared to be working through all of that. I think that the business model is the really key thing. And I think that's, like some people say, well, think big and dream big, which is what I've said at the start. That is true. But you've also got to work out the right business model. That's not the easy bit, and then be able to execute. But I think if you can get the business model right, the execution part can come after that by getting the right people, building the right processes. It's something that we've always done at DNA, but we've had to reinvent our own business model a number of times. We reinvented it last year. I sort of took the principle that 10x is better than 2x. So we could follow it to grow a 2x optimization of what we're doing, or we could cut some things out, change some pricing, some structural things, and go for 10x. That's what we did. And in fact, we weren't that long in that journey where we saw a way to go 1,000x. And technology's allowed us to now do that, with AI. So, but you've got to be prepared to change your own business model, be prepared to take a risk with that. I think everybody's, but I sometimes look at the risks as they're not as big as you think they are, right? But they're changes. And what we're doing right now with artificial intelligence, others who are in a business like ours probably wouldn't do it because it goes against the grain of the business. But somewhere you've got to get out of your own way and take that chance if you want to make a quantum leap. And it's easier to make a quantum leap when you're smaller, particularly in today's world, than if you've, if we, and making that concrete, if DNA had gone down the path of being totally a training company using behavioral insights, we might be a somewhat of a bigger brand in terms of more people and employees and coaches, but we would be landlocked to that. And in COVID, when training stopped, we'd have had nothing. Whereas I kept it very much that we're a data company that power other businesses. And that's always allowed us to grow. And it's not about the number of employees. I mean, you can be $1 billion business today with 10 employees. That's very possible.
Absolutely.
I always thought we needed 100 to do that. That 100 employees would be at 100 million revenue. But as time's gone along, that number went down to 50. And today I would say that is the $1 billion revenue is totally achievable with 10 employees of the right people doing the right things. Now you need some consultants and support people off, in their right slots, but you don't need huge teams these days if you can stay nimble. I think this is the thing is, as part of building your business is to really think through it and not build huge teams too early, just throw money up against the wall before it's needed to. I think that, and there's a great business in the UK where you are, Simon, that just got sold, a business called Preqin for £2.5 billion. It got sold to BlackRock. But it's a privately held business. They kept control of their decision making. It's got from what I could see, around 500 employees. But that's the model. Now there'd be other businesses with that kind of revenue that have got 15,000 employees. Which would you want?
I think, I think just going back to your point about the vision and the targets. Again, I think the important thing is about this: having a target, having a vision, having setting yourself something to aim for.
Yeah,
but absolutely, it's so important to understand that the journey. It's about the journey, not the destination, as they say.
It's about the journey, not the destination. And as I've gone along, I said probably 15 years ago, if we had 1 million people profiled, I knew what, again, it was an impact-based goal, but I knew what the revenue would be. And then I moved that up to 100 million. If we got to 100 million people, what would that be? And then a friend of mine said, well, Hugh, you're thinking small. You shouldn't be setting any goal under 1 billion. And I looked at that, and long after I read a book, and sort of it said to do the same thing. But the point is even if you only achieve 10% of the goal, you've achieved way more than you would have otherwise.
Absolutely.
But what you've done is designed a structure that allows you, that gives you the chance to do that. Whether you look, whether we hit 1 billion people to get profiled, which is now the goal, or to be in our system, in some ways doesn't matter, but we've set a structure up where we can do that. But if we only got to 1/10 or 100th of that, we are still extremely successful.
And as you say, it's about measuring the right things as well. Obviously, our business is in social media marketing and content marketing, and you can imagine that the perception from individual to individual, business to business, of what success means can be, I just need awareness, I just need shares, likes, I need but actually, or do I need actual leads, or do I need confirmed business? And every business is different. Because, ultimately, we will always actively say, look, ultimately, this needs to make you money. This needs to grow your business, grow your brand, grow your sales and leads. But don't get fooled by vanity metrics, and actually, I'm not just talking about likes and shares and follower numbers there. I'm actually talking about, like you've said, hires, amounts of people that are in the business. Because we all see on social media, we see businesses and individuals saying, I've scaled my business to 100 people, or 1,000 people, or whatever. And again, is that really the metric that matters? Headcount? Because there's so many people that will argue that the more people that you have to manage, it's going to be a tougher job. There's a lot more to consider. So like you say, you if you can keep lean but scale, then that's absolutely, there's nothing wrong with that, But equally, that every business is different, and every business has different margins and retail pricing and things like that. But the importance is you need to measure what matters.
You need to measure what matters for you to achieve your dream. And I think the more nimble you can make your business structure and model, the better. And I think, to me, technology is the differentiator or the enabler today that enables that to happen. That's the exciting thing. And I think then it's just thinking through, like I was thinking through, business model the other day, Simon, for a spin-off business that we've been working on. And, does that spin-off business become a SaaS revenue model? Or is it just more of a data play? And the SaaS revenue model still needs quite a lot of capitalization and headcount to make it work, whereas the data model is almost none. If done the right way, it's a tenth of it. Now, will the gross revenue of the data model be the same as the SaaS revenue model? Maybe not, but the net revenue and the gross margins are way higher. And the impact's more, and it's easier to manage. You can change the path if you want to, right? But the capex up front is not as high. I think these are all the things that one's got to to look at. But you can be fooled, which is sort of part of where you're going. You can be fooled by looking at other businesses and thinking, well, I've got to do that way too, without thinking it through all the way. And what are the trends out there as well? It's something that's is important to understand. In terms of what buyers want and how they want a service to turn up.
You sound like you've got the business really, you're really on top of how you run the business and what the product and the service and the offering is, the audience and even the scalability and everything. What about marketing?
Well, we've got a lot closer to that place. I never get it. Yeah.
Well, what about your marketing activity? What are you finding works to get your business out there and to get it scaling in on that side, and what is a challenge and a struggle on that front?
Yeah, I think that look, there's no doubt meeting a person one-on-one, even for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, builds trust. There's no doubt about that. But as a business, even if you've got lots of employees, you can only meet so many people. So the marketing has got to be, and then the sales process has got to be way more than you. I'm a believer in a marketing-driven business probably than a sales-driven business in terms of the structure and the headcount. I think the positioning of the business is really important. The messaging, as you were alluding to, maybe it's not necessarily having the maximum website hits, it's having the right ones that are coming to you, and you wanting to get engaged. The people that do come to you are already 60 or 70% engaged to buy, as opposed to 5%, and you spend 5 years trying to sell to them. I think understanding all of those things is important. I find from an engagement point of view, doing what we're doing now, just doing podcasts is one way of being out there. But I think going to the next level is around DNA. We've built a lot of partnerships, and so we've built technology-based partnerships where we live in other ecosystems. That helps us get found. We've got a lot of partners that our product is connected to their product, so when they get sold, we get sold, and we play well with those types of people. I think that's probably been the key to it. I'm an introvert, so I'm not your complete social networker or business networker out at every event, speaking on stage at every conference, and in some ways that's never really worked. But we've done a good job at the people that we do connect with, we go deep with, and we've done it really more on an ecosystem approach.
It sounds like
and
a
their
lot
success
of
rides with our success, and sometimes that's slower because everybody's got to build the relationship. Maybe there's a technology step that needs to be done. but once you got it right, it's sustainable. And there's a lot of growing businesses around us now, and we grow with them.
Yeah, I think
And
the strength of the network is
yeah,
so important, more important than ever, especially in an increasingly digital age.
yeah, I think that's right. And what do you do when you've got things, pandemics, like COVID come up, where there are no conferences and events for 2 years, and you're left with Zoom? And I think a lot of people realize, well, gee, it's not Zoom is not the same as meeting a person one-on-one in person, but you can get a long way down the track. But if you've got the right partnerships in place, then things will continue to flow. Of course, there'll be the odd one that there's a business change somewhere, or whether it's on our side or the other side, that it goes away. But generally speaking, they can stick. And I've done enough reading on all of this from McKinsey work, Harvard work, whatever, that I think the key is building a really strong ecosystem of partners where everybody can have their own identity but be linked in an ecosystem. I think that's the key. And being each other's champion in some way. I think that's the key. That's the key marketing step. You can write websites and rewrite websites forever. And that having clarity of the message and what you're about and the business structure and the model, that's all important. But I think at the end of the day, it's having enough of the right relationships there. But we want DNA. We want to get more enterprise relationships. But I can't be, and our team, and it wouldn't matter how many salespeople, we can't be sitting in the corridors of every home office. And they've all got strategies. And guess what? A lot of them are closed because even now they don't all go to the office every day, and they're blocked for meetings. So somewhere the marketing's got to transcend all of that. And that means it's different. It's got to be different to, what it was 20 years ago.
A huge part is having the trust, or building the trust with, and the reputation with those potential people that you want to work with. Obviously, having trusted partners is a big step to that. It's how you kind of then grow that network, isn't it? To those cold people that are never heard of you, don't know what you do, and getting in touch with those and getting those people on board.
Yeah, because the partners, I think, then the network can help then be the referral source. I think that referrals are still the way to go. And, there's people that I met 15 years ago that, by us being, not just me, but our team being decent with them even 15 years ago, they're back on our front doorstep because they're ready to do something. And then suddenly that scales into something very big quite quickly. I think that's what you want to be, doing. Now, of course, there's always the short term and the long term, but I think with whatever you do, the steps you take, you've got to be thinking about it with the long game, not just being a short term trick. As well, people soon figure that out.
And also, understanding that, because this is again another issue that people face, because they get tricked into believing that there are overnight successes, and there may be overnight successes, but they're few and far between. The overnight success is that overnight has actually been 20 years or something in the making. That any of the most influential people that you see, whether it's movie stars, business people, influencers online, sports people, they're all the culmination of many, many years of hard work, of challenges, of tough times, of good times. Again, they probably had a very clear vision of what they wanted to achieve. But the difference is they had the resilience and the understanding that it's the journey to get there.
Yeah, I think and you've emphasized that a couple of times, today, Simon, in the conversation. I think it is about the journey. You've got to enjoy the journey, accept you're going to make mistakes. Hopefully there's more wins than losses. Sort of work on the 80-20 rule, but sometimes I think it's probably a little less than that. I think if you win 70% of the time, making the right choices, there's always going to be something that you don't do right, so long as it's not catastrophic.
Yeah, I prefer those odds.
And enjoy it, and don't worry about what other people think. Play your own game. I think that's the most important thing. And then just build loyal people around you that believe in you, what you've got and what you're doing. But also be prepared to be flexible. No one wants to be Kodak and stuck in in an old business model, and then suddenly wake up and find that within a year or two it's all gone away, when you had the opportunity to change. And that's the thing that we sit there now, is that AI is bringing great changes, but you've got to know where to invest in AI, how to do it, what the business model will be. It's not just substituting tasks at the bottom end of your business, cutting a few people out and replacing them with tools. It's got to be better done than that, right? And AI should be used to empower workforces, not necessarily substitute them. I think there will be structural changes, but it requires pretty considered thinking. But it needs to be done as well, because otherwise there's going to be some pretty well-known businesses over the next 5 or 6 years that are going to be irrelevant. And some of the smaller ones are going to have a chance to do something great. And there'll be some big ones that are going to go miles ahead too, right? Let's see what Microsoft does yet.
Well, I mean, we've certainly seen the world explode and ChatGPT become notorious. But 100% agree. I have this conversation all the time about the use of AI and it's improving and in creating opportunities rather than taking them away. That's what the mission should be, but also that's actually what it can be and probably will be, because just like with any technology that we've ever created, it's only improved opportunities. It's only just made everyone better, being able to perform better and open more doors. Yeah,
I think that's the right thinking. But I think also, one's got to think about what the business model is underneath all of it. What is it that you're really selling? Where can the key changes be made? Not just surface changes. What's a structural change you can make using technology and AI? And that's where great success might lie for some people who get that right.
Absolutely.
For those that don't face up to that, it could be very problematic.
Absolutely. Well, Hugh, this has been absolutely fantastic. Really enjoyed this conversation with you. I hope you have too.
Yeah, I have, Simon. It's been great. We've gone to some new depths, I think.
Absolutely. I think a lot of a great inspirational story, a lot of actual practical advice, and for a lot of people, just a very kind of grounding advice as well, because there's a lot of back to reality kind of snippets in here. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's a pleasure, Simon. I'm really glad that we connected and could do this, and look forward to staying in touch. And I think just to wrap up, if anybody wants to find me, I know you'll probably be saying it, Simon, somewhere on the podcast, but just go to dnabehavior.com and it's all there.
We'll link to all of your relevant sites and socials in the notes as well. So for anybody listening, they can find you at those links. So thank you so much.
Perfect, Simon. All right, we'll stay in touch.
Brilliant.
Thank you for watching and listening to Content in Business. Please rate this podcast, hit subscribe, and follow Si McMahon on social media to keep up with future episodes. The Content in Business podcast is produced by Playfair, helping you with high-performing social activity every single day. Want to boost your brand awareness, sales, and leads? Partner with Playfair. Find out more and book a call at playfairmarketing.com.